Fantastic. Welcome, Internet audience. If you've joined us for some of our previous live streams, this has been an adventure in learning all kinds of different angles of the technology, and we've done it once again. As you'll notice in today's live stream, we're running simultaneously straight through our residency artist presentation right into the Q&A, so we're not going to have separate live streams going. Hence the little overlap of audio and video that you got there for a second as we were making all these things speak to each other correctly. But we are now speaking to each other correctly. So welcome to the sixth and penultimate Keynotes Virtual Jazz Residency Series made possible by the Jerome Mirza Foundation and Knox College. And I want to remind those of us who are here in the webinar or who are joining us live on YouTube, on the Knox College YouTube channel, that you can participate in a few different ways. And because we're doing all of this event within the same live stream today, you can participate at any point, throw in questions at any point during the presentation, and we'll get to those during the Q&A. People who are on the Zoom webinar with us, you can raise your hand, you can submit questions to the chat here in the webinar. If you are watching us on YouTube, like I said, you can submit questions in the chat anytime. Ulysses is going to take over the reins here in a minute after I warmly introduce him, and then we'll join back together at the end of his presentation to talk. But as I said, you can submit questions anytime during the chat, and we'll field those. And we'll get to as many questions as we can during the Q&A after his presentation. But who is presenting for us today? Let's take just a second to appreciate just how lucky we are. It is a pleasure to welcome our keynote resident artist, Ulysses Owens Jr. He is widely considered one of the greatest drummers working on the scene today, as evidenced by his work with some of the jazz world's leading artists, including Christian McBride, Kurt Elling, Wynton Marsalis, Diane Shore, and many, many, many more. He has been named a Rising Star by Downbeat's Critics Poll for 5 years straight, released 5 albums as a band leader on his own to critical acclaim, and has made a name for himself as an equally in-demand producer with over 40 credits to his name and counting. But he hasn't stopped there. That sounds like 4 people's careers to me, but that's not enough for him. He devotes time to philanthropy, most notably through his family's nonprofit organization, Don't Miss a Beat, which empowers young people through musical, artistic, academic, and civic engagement programming. He is also an esteemed educator in the areas of jazz percussion and improvisation, and his new book, The Musician's Career Guide, Turning Your Talent into Sustained Success, will be released in just a little over a month. So he's been busy. I can't imagine a day he's not with a resume like that. We are thrilled to welcome this incredible artist, entrepreneur, and educator to the Jerome Mirza Keynotes Virtual Residency. And now I will hand over the stage and screen to our guest, Ulysses Owens Jr. Welcome.
Welcome, everybody. How are you? I'm so honored to be part of this residency. Look at a lot of the great names and that are part of it. Some of them are my friends, like I saw Camila Mesa was part of that. I saw Allison Miller and some other great people that are part of it. So I'm just really blessed to be in the number, or as my grandmother would say, I'm in good company. And so I want to tell you a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today. I want to let you know I'm actually here in Jacksonville, Florida, which is my hometown. It is also the place of Don't Miss a Beat, my family's organization. And so I've been very active here in Jacksonville for about 13 years, but I most recently moved back about 2 years ago, literally right before the pandemic. I moved in November of 2019, got an apartment here, love it. And then literally March, our whole lives changed. So I'm really, loving being here in Florida and that whole, process. But what I'm here to talk to you today about is actually not about being in Florida. I'm here to talk to you about this picture in this book that you see. And I want to kind of set it up a little bit before I go into the presentation. So I'm really fortunate to have gone to the Juilliard School to be more formal. I was also part of their inaugural jazz program. I graduated in 2006. I was also one of the students that was part of their not only inaugural jazz program, but the inaugural Bachelor of Fine Arts program, which means that when I started in 2001, I was an artist diploma student, and I was one of 4 high school students that was there. then, the dean and the provost came to us at a certain point, and they simply said, "Hey, we want to make sure that you get a degree, and we want to make sure that you're in a position where you can graduate here with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree." So that took me on a whole other journey. Where that leads this book is that I got to Juilliard and I was saying to myself, I feel like Juilliard is an incredible institution artistically, and they definitely taught me how to be a great artist. But towards the end of my time, particularly the last 2 years, I started saying to myself, like, how do I get to the point where I understand what the music business is? Because it was very clear, like when I started my first year, Facebook was literally in its first iteration. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg and his, friends had just created the first year of it. I remember literally moving into my dorm my freshman year, and it was just available to college students. And so, from my first year to my fifth year, where Facebook went from this sort of college, little website to this major thing. And then also my first year was really the downsizing of CD disc or compact disc to the iPod and all of that whole change. So I feel like I was in college in a very transitory time in music and technology. So long story short, I took these two music business courses at Juilliard. I took one that was business of music for classical musicians, and the second course I took was business of music for jazz musicians, both of which really dealt with an antiquated industry. So from the time I graduated in 2006 up to, I would say, maybe probably 5, 6 years ago, I had a notebook this thick of things that I wish someone had taught me about the music business, entrepreneurship, and career development, because I found myself building success, but in so many different ways. And I feel like nobody talked to me about, taxes. They didn't talk to me about what it is to build a business. How do you form an LLC? How do you deal with, if you're not being pursued by a club, if you don't have a manager or an agent, how do you work? And so I've been keeping this journal of stuff. I also was fortunate to go on the road, as Nikki very eloquently said, with some of the industry's best artists, and that was literally like college for me as well. And I have all these conversations and notes that I took from them. So long story short, a few years ago, I went and met with Chamber Music America, which is an incredible organization, and I just left Christian McBride's band, and they were like, Ulysses, you had this great career, what are you going to do now? And I said, well, I think, like I'm going to do this, this, and this. And they said, okay, great. And they said, well, what else are you doing? I said, well, I have this book of notes, and it's about music business and career development and entrepreneurship. And I want to turn it into a book one day, and I want to start lecturing about it. And Gargi Shindi and Susan Dadian both said to me, Ulysses, that's amazing. There's a lot of universities that need to hear that. And I said, really? They said, yes. And they said they really need to hear it from people like you who've been in the industry, because, the career development and music entrepreneurship space, in terms of the collegiate sector, is kind of split into a couple of different sort of sects, in that you have some people lecturing who have just been in education, which is cool. Then you have some people lecturing who have maybe had a little bit of a career, but they've devoted more of their time to just studying and analyzing the industry. And then you have very rare moments with people like me who've actually lived a full career that also get into the academic space. And so Gargi and Susan were saying, Ulysses, you would be a very unique voice in this space. And so, to be honest, I took their advice, and it was probably the best thing that I could have ever done, because now I look up maybe about 5, 6 years later, and I have a book that has been published by Skyhorse Publishing. It's distributed by Simon & Schuster. It is going to be released May 18th. I've now been fortunate to lecture at over 40 colleges and universities around the world about entrepreneurship. And so it's very exciting to me. So I want to tell you, very nuts and bolts, The Musician's Career Guide, Turning Your Talent into Sustained Success, is a book that was written by myself, but I also had a co-author, Arlen Gargaliano. And what Arlen did was, Arlen came to me because I had the whole manuscript. I literally have it on my computer, where it was just hundreds of pages of just me talking about my experience. And Arlen, having, written a lot of books and also having co-authored a lot of books, as well as ghostwritten a lot of books, she came to me and said, okay, Ulysses, here are some ways that we can really approach and make sure your book is really more of a textbook and a guide, because the industry has changed, and you could really be one of the voices that kind of lead people. And so I want to let you know that's really what The Musician's Career Guide is. It's broken up into 4 parts within the book that deals with everything from you first falling in love with the instrument or your voice, getting a teacher. It goes from that to you going to high school, going to college, then you either continuing with your career as a focal point. Then it shifts into the business of music, Then it goes from there into sort of, people that you're going to need to embrace in the music business. And then it sort of ends with what I like to call art and survival, which is how do you take this art that you love and adore and how do you survive? And so I deal with things in this book that I feel like haven't been dealt with in this way. And it's really a narrative. So it's not just a bunch of information, but it's actual narratives of me sharing my own journey. The last thing that's really cool about the book is that it was written, literally I had to turn it into the publisher March of 2020. And it was written literally as COVID was happening. And so I remember having the final manuscript. Arlen and I had, approved everything. We had proofread it hundreds of times. And I remember emailing Arlen, like, I had just gotten home from New York because I obviously teach at Juilliard, so I commute back and forth. And I said, Arlen, this COVID thing, I think is going to be pretty serious. I mean, this pandemic is like changing the industry. I want to put a chapter in the book. And so she said, oh my God, Ulysses, that's a great idea. Hurry up and write it. So I literally wrote my chapter on the pandemic and what I like to call a sort of coined pandemic entrepreneurship for artists. And I put it in the book. So I think to date, it will be probably one of the only music business and career development books that have a section on COVID. So with that said, I'm excited and let's dive right in. So today I want to challenge students and with first these questions. I want you to be thinking about what kind of career do you desire to have post-graduation? I know that I'm probably speaking to a range of students. I'm speaking to people who may have already graduated, people who are also grad students, maybe people who are in the middle of their doctoral thesis, or I may just be speaking to people who just want to check this out. I know I'm speaking to some of the administration, and to all of you all in administration, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate each and every one of you. So I want you to be thinking about what kind of career do you desire to have post-grad or post-whatever, even post-pandemic. Because I find that, students many times think that your career is just going to evolve out of nowhere. And that was something that I got from very intimate conversations with Kurt Elling and Christian McBride and Nick Payton and even Winton and different people that I had a chance to have very beautiful conversations with, was you need to be actively thinking about what you want. It is not going to just magically appear. And that was something that I remember having a conversation with Winter Marsalis. And I never forget, he said something really beautiful to me. We were chatting in his dressing room. And he said, Ulysses, if I never had jazz at Lincoln Center, if I never had the ability to have Lincoln Center as a huge support system, he said, I would still be doing the same thing I'm doing. I said, well, what do you mean? He says, I would still be writing Blood on the Fields or All Rise or all the various things that he wrote. He said, now, I don't know how big they would be. He said, I don't know if I would have been able to do it at Tully Hall. I don't know if I would have been able to, have the musicians compensated in the way that I'm able to compensate them. He said, but the vision of what you see in my life and in my career is what I've always desired. And I'm very grateful that I have supported. So I say for you, all with this first question, make sure you have a broad imagination, but that you make note and you take note on what it is you want to have. Secondly, it's very important to understand, what does success look like for you? I've had a really great time talking to Nikki and those at other universities, and it's been very interesting to see how success for all of us means different things. Success for me is, I always wanted to be an author. And so now for me, success is this, being able to sit in front of you all and lecture about this topic that's very meaningful to me in this book that I've literally put my heart and soul into. For you, success may be, graduating with a degree and going and getting a job and maybe playing music on the weekend. I can't decide what that is for you all, but you have to make sure that you hold on to what that is. And also do not compare yourself to other people's journey. The third thing is, how do you plan to become successful? Because as I've said before, without reiterating, success is something that to me is a sum total of a lot of plans and strategies that you have put together for yourself. And then the universe conspires with you. And then you're able to accomplish those things with a lot of hard work and consistency and persistence. Another key that's really important with students that I think we don't consider often is, what do you feel can distract or prohibit your career? I find that one of my mentors said to me many years ago, Hollis King, a great photographer, and he worked with a lot of major record labels, and he is what you call not only a photographer, but an image and brand consultant. He is the guy that literally took various artists that if I named who they were, you'd be shocked. And when they came to him, they were normal people. By the time he started changing their image and coupled with photo shoots and connecting them with stylists and what have you, they are the artists that we know today. And I never forget, many years ago, he said to me, Ulysses, if you meet a person or an artist over the age of 35 and they haven't accomplished what they want to accomplish, chances are they have self-sabotaged. I'm going to leave that there for a second and tell you again. If you meet someone over a certain age and they have not become what they want to become, chances are they have self-sabotaged. So what does that mean? That means that many times we are the main thing that could stand in our way of accomplishing whatever it is that we want to accomplish. So you, whoever you are, you can enhance your life or you can distract from your life having that forward motion. And then lastly, do you feel you're successful now? And I have to say to everybody, and every time I get a chance to lecture, if you have gotten to this point where you're on the other end of the screen and we're talking and we're, doing what we're doing, you are successful because this is a very invited audience. And to get here, I'm sure you had to go through a lot of different things. So I want you to think about these opening questions. You can take pictures of it, write it down. And I also want, which you'll hear me talk about a lot, is write down the things that are registering to you. Even as I'm talking, if there are things that are resonating with you, write them down so you can go back and revisit them. As we move forward, I want you to understand what an entrepreneur is. I think that today's musician, today's artist, today's creative is going to have to be entrepreneurial, meaning you're going to have to figure out a way to engage entrepreneurial activities, entrepreneurial mindsets into what you're doing. You can no longer just be a creative for the sake of being creative. So an entrepreneur is a person who organizes and operates a business or businesses taking on greater than normal financial risk in order to do so. I consider myself a creative entrepreneur, which means I do all of that stuff, organize, operate business or businesses, taking on sometimes greater than normal financial risk in the creative space. I also think an entrepreneur is a person that doesn't wait on an industry to give them permission to be creative. They get an idea, they create that idea, they create the team around that idea, and then they move forward and they execute that idea on whatever stage that they can. So I think that is also a big part of being entrepreneurial. So I consider myself a creative entrepreneur. The next thing that's really important, and I begin the book, with that, and I start this presentation with you understanding, answering those questions and who you are and what you want to accomplish, then understanding what it is to be entrepreneurial. Then the first thing I will say all of us have is we're all talented. But I tell people all the time, talent is something that I know that I have, and I love it, and I've seen so many people in this world have it, and we all have it on some level, but talent does not amaze me. It does not make me, it doesn't excite me, it doesn't thrill me, because I think talent is something that we were all blessed with. And so talent here is described as a natural aptitude or skill. One of the things that I think we have to make sure, though, of is what is our actual talent. And in the book, I actually go into an in-depth story where Robert Glasper, who was an incredible Grammy-winning artist, talks about the difference between talents, hobbies, and your gift. And so that's something that I can even, expound upon a little bit later. But it's important to know we all possess talent. But the next thing, and I talk a lot about this new generation, is that talent versus mastery are two completely different things. So talent is, even let's take music out of the picture. Some of us may be talented at cooking, right? We can whip up something quickly, or people come over, or if it's just us and our partner and we want to hang out, we can cook. But mastery to me is studying and analyzing and understanding just about everything there is to know about cooking. And so that to me is the same thing with music. We have a lot of people that are talented, but not a lot of people that are masters. And, here the definition, or a definition of mastery is, it's a comprehensive knowledge or skill in a subject or accomplishment. And I want to encourage you with these 2 points here. You must take the time to master something because that gives you leverage. And then leverage gives you power and influence, which gives you placement. From this place, you can pivot into any direction you want to go. So for many of you all who are saying, hey, Ulysses, I love what you're saying, but I've been stuck in this place, or I've been trying to get to this next level. Chances are you probably have not committed yourself to mastery. Now, you're talented, and you maybe created moments to further your talent, or you've made moments to expose that talent to the world. But I always say, if you are a master at something, ultimately doors will begin to open for you because you're amongst the rare group and breed of people who are mastering whatever it is that you're doing. So my encouragement to you all that are students, seek to master whatever it is you're doing, because people will seek you out, because there will be very few people that are masters at what they do. The next thing is, when we start talking about mastery is something that has to be pursued, but it also has to be pursued in an environment. You don't just wake up one day and say, I'm just going to stay at my house and stay in my practice room, and I'm just going to master this thing. you have to go out and have various coaches. You have to have various people who are in your life that believe in you, that also have achieved a level of mastery, and then they can teach you how to get to that next level. So college to me and for me was a place of mastery. Juilliard, I always say when I walked into Juilliard, I already knew how to play the drums. But when I left Juilliard, it allowed me to leave. And I won't say that I was a master when I left, but I understood and was a complete musician and understood more about my craft than I did walking in the door. So the reason why I encourage students to go to college, if they can, is because college, and I state what it gave me, but I think it can give all of you the same thing. College gives you a network. And I want to tell you, particularly of those of you that want to be a jazz musician, gone are the days where you could get into somebody's band, like Art Blakey or Betty Carter or, Illinois Jacquette or whoever's band. And that was where you built your network. That was where you got your gigs. That was where just things started to come together for you. That has really changed. College is now becoming that place where you build that initial network. The second thing that college teaches you is it gives you critical thinking skills. There are so many courses that I had to learn how to think in a critical way and strategic way that had I not gone to college, I would not have had that challenge. Another thing that college gives you, especially those that graduate, is that it gives you the ability to complete tasks, which builds your personal faith within yourself, which shows that you can start and complete something for the rest of your life. And I want to unpack this point a little bit. I've had a lot of people come to me, particularly old school musicians, jazz musicians, who are like, man, you talk a lot about college. So are you saying that the school of hard knocks is irrelevant? And I will never say that it's irrelevant. I think there are some people whose journey included that. And I think the school of hard knocks is still necessary, even if you go get a degree. If you get a degree, you still need to put that degree on the shelf, frame it, give it to mom or dad or whomever. And then you need to go out there and get real experience, because there's nothing to me that can equate the power of a person with a degree or multiple degrees that also has relevance in quote unquote the real world, because now you have both vantage points. But I want you to unpack, or I want to unpack the idea around personal faith in yourself. When I graduated college, it allowed me to look in the mirror and say, Ulysses, through all the challenges and things that you've gone through, you've done this. And so day one, or 2006, it was graduating college. A few years later, it was me starting my production company. A few years later, it was me, starting the nonprofit business with my family. And all of those things are still maintaining. My production company is now 11 years old. Don't Miss a Beat is 13 years old. And so that ability in college to start and complete something just carried right over into all the other things that I was doing. And so I say here, if you can think it, you can become it. If you can't think it, you can't overcome it. And so college gives you, if you really take advantage of it, that ability to be resilient and kind of build those mental and emotional muscles. The other thing is, which I just sort of made the point regarding the School of Hard Knocks, is degrees are great because they give you information, but information does not always lead to impact. Impact comes from experience. Your destiny, I believe, will require both. I can't tell you how many people I've worked with PhDs that are incredibly brilliant. They've written incredible thesis statements, but if you sat them in the room of a classroom of children, they could not captivate or impact those children for more than 2 minutes, which leads to believe, I think it's great to get a PhD or a master's or even a bachelor's, but you still have to figure out that ability to connect to people. And that also is something I deal with in the book, which boils down to relationships and learning how to build relationships and maximize those relationships. As I go forward in the book, I also talk about once you've continued that path of mastery, you then have to figure out what is your career profile. And I use my own life as an example. My career profile started as being a drummer and a sideman, or what I like to make sure we're politically correct and equitable, a side person, which meant that I was basically just playing people's music. I was hired to play people's music and either tour, record, and make somebody else's band sound good. I shifted from that into education, where now I'm a professor at Juilliard. I've been there for over 5 years, but also I educated and taught master classes. I also engaged in philanthropy. I have my production company, and now I'm an entrepreneur, which, has led me to multiple things. But I want you to be thinking about, for you all, what is going to be your desired career profile? Because I think that it's not enough to say, oh, I want to be a teacher or I want to be a musician. What is the trajectory of where you're headed? And I say that because I was asked a very serious question when I was in college by Carl Allen, and this is in the book, and it's really kind of the whole premise behind my entrepreneurial work. And the question he asked me was, Ulysses, do you want to make a living or do you want to design a career? And I said, well, what is the difference? He said, well, making a living is when you just choose to have a job. Most people in this world make a living. They work a job. That job pays that person a salary, and they are able to pay whatever, commitments that they have or bills they have. When you design a career isn't solely about making a living. A career can lead to making a living, but a career is not just a living, it's a platform. So you're making a living, but as part of a platform that you're building to do even greater work. And so I want you all to think about what is your career profile. And I want you to take 60 seconds and write down what your career profile is. And I'm very, very big believer in, or I should say, I am a very big believer in writing it down, make it happen. There's a great book that changed my life. It's actually written by Henrietta Klausner, and it's called Write It Down, Make It Happen. And it talks about the ability to write things down or chart things down or write them down in the format of goals. And then literally the universe will conspire with you. And through various things like the law of attraction and building relationships, your dreams will come true. So I want to take 60 seconds. I'm going to time you all. And I want you to literally write it down and make it happen, what your desired career profile is. So 60 seconds starting now. We're at 45 seconds. All right. So I hope you took that time to write down what your career profile is. And the one thing that I want you to know is that list that you saw of mine was something that evolved in this almost 20 years that I've been out here making a career for myself. But for you, you may just be in stage one, so don't feel the pressure to create a long list or to feel like you have to accomplish everything on this list. What my career profile is today is much different than it was 5 years ago. I mean, my career profile now involves me writing various books. Before, it was just I wanted to have certain performing opportunities. So your career profile is something that will evolve as you evolve. Moving on, I think it's important to know that as you think about your career profile, there's then the presentation aspect of your brand and what I call the tools and materials for success. I know that you all probably have been taught, what a bio is, probably from the time you've been in high school. But it's important for you to have a really good bio, also a short bio, which I consider under 500 words, or a long bio that is over 1,000 words. And you're going to need this bio through the years. And I think it's really important as well to have a CV, which you see here as well, when you get, especially post-grad and you start applying for various jobs. I'm certain that at Knox College, there are writing centers. There are places that can help you create and craft all of these different materials. Also, thank God for Google. So you can go on there and pull various templates as well. So it's important to have those things and resumes. All of that is really important because when you start getting into the space of, whether it's pitching yourself for various things, which I'll talk about shortly, people are going to want to see who you are. What is this narrative of who you are in 500 words or less or in 1,000 words or less, so I can just determine how much a part of your success am I going to be part of. Another thing that's really key as well is having a website. I know that your generation is very much into the social media thing, which I love social media. It is social media to me has been the biggest blessing, I think, to the independent artist because it has allowed you and allowed us to have control over our audience. It's allowed us to be able to really keep a record account of who believes in what we do and also build our fan base, and it's not tied to any record contract or any specific opportunities. But I think websites are still really key, because within the website is a place that particularly, granting organizations, academic organizations or institutions, anybody that's considering you for an opportunity can go to your website and be able to see things that will help them in making a decision on how they want to engage with you. A quote here that I have by Paul Rand is, "Design is the silent ambassador of your brand." So I think websites are really key. And here's the thing, websites, just like your career profile, can grow. I've had a website since I was about 14, 15 years old. And now what my website is, as I'm close to, I'll say a little bit older than 16, is much different than it was many years ago. So you have to define for you, what are going to be your tabs? What are going to be the ways that you break up your website into different categories that people can see that pertain to your career? Another thing is, if you're an artist, you're going to need to create an album. Now, I'm going to tell you that, which I'll get into later when I talk about recording deals. When you create an album today, or CD or digital EP or whatever, you're creating it because you need a calling card, and you also want to start to build a body of work. You're not creating it because you're hoping that it does something for you. You're creating it because of whatever your future goals are. And I will tell you that even in academia, having an album can allow people to know, again, that you not only can complete something, but having an album also gives your brand a sound. So I think it's very important for you all, if you're students, to be thinking about long term, whether you're going to release a single or an EP or something. Because when people come up to me and they say, Ulysses, I'm an artist, I'm a musical artist, the first thing I ask is, have you released anything? Is there anything out there? And so I think that is something really key I want you all to be thinking about. The next thing is, when we talk about, all the various things where we've gone from, right? We've started with, being entrepreneurial, then we go from talent, mastery, environments of success, career profile, tools, and materials for success. Ultimately, all of these things to me come down to a couple major things. And what sort of allows you to get or not become what I talked about earlier, which is a self-sabotage, is these next couple things that I'm going to deal with, which is work ethic. A work ethic is very, very, very important to have. And I find that people that have a good work ethic are normally the ones that will accomplish what they're going to get or what they desire. Because to have a good work ethic, it means you have to be self-motivated. And most of us are not self-motivated. Most of us are waiting for someone else to push us to get to the next level. But I find those of us that are really motivated are the ones that can accomplish something. I actually have a really cool quote that I just wrote down today. One of my favorite entrepreneurs is Mark Cuban. And it was really interesting. He says a couple different things. Yeah, he says, I'm convinced, actually this is a Steve Jobs quote. He says, I'm convinced that about half of what separates successful entrepreneurs from the non-successful ones is pure perseverance. Another thing that Mark Cuban talked about was, it's not about money or connections, it's the willingness to outwork and outlearn everybody. So with that said, work ethic is a very, very key thing that all of us have to make sure that we manage. And so I have a couple notes here with regard to work ethic. So the first thing is a quote that I love from Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith, which simply says, freedom comes from organization. You're able to be free to express yourself and to really give yourself to something when you have organized yourself. And in college, I know that can be really overwhelming at times. Another thing that I love to say a lot of times is I handle things ahead of time so that it happens effectively in time. Second, understand when you don't have ethic, because you can always attain more of it. And then lastly, really successful people say no more than yes. So work ethic is really that internal drive. It's that internal drive, but also I find that it's that internal sort of corrector. Just like when you drive in a car and the car can kind of correct itself. I find that your ethic is what that is to your future success. It allows you to say, okay, I could go to bed right now, but if I just work another hour, I'll get a little bit further along. And so I want you to know you will not be successful without making sure you have a well-tuned and refined work ethic. I'll take just a quick little break, and I hope you all are learning something. I know I'm moving and giving you a lot of information, but I hope you're learning something. I hope you're getting something out of this. uh, and taking a just a quick breather. I know it's kind of, I can lay a lot of information on people and it can become information overload. But again, I hope that these are things that you take time to process, over time, and not think that all of a sudden after this presentation you have to try to hurt yourself trying to accomplish and do everything. With that said, I want to venture into time management. Something that Ben Wolf told me when I was in school. He said, time, for those of you that are college students, you will never have more time than you do right now to perfect your craft. So maximize it. And also, the other thing about time that you have in college is you have a lot of uninterrupted time. Now, being an adult and I'm managing multiple things, as Nikki explained earlier in introducing me, I have so many things pulling at my time, and those moments where I could just go into a room and I could just exhaust myself on a subject. I don't have that a lot now. And so as you become an adult, you have many things that you're going to have to manage, particularly for those of you all that are going to have a family. So take advantage of now where you may not have to manage that. Another thing is the key to success lies within your ability to manage time according to the goals you have, and then make sure that you have to-do lists. I'm going to have you all write again. But to-do lists are one of the things that really changed my life. I think it's what helped me to amplify my work ethic. So I have two different types of to-do lists. I have a short-term to-do list, which, for example, is something like, practicing fundamentals, learning music for upcoming gigs, uh, update social media, website, continue writing a new arrangement. Long-term, schedule and play gigs at 6 new venues, write and record new record, foster relationships with 3 new colleges or universities, or expand my book of original music. So I want you to take about 30 seconds now, and I want you all to think about what is on your short-term and long-term to-do list. What are those things that for me, short-term are things that need to be done in a matter of 72 hours or less, or even in 7 days or less, versus your long-term could be things that could happen in the time span of maybe 2 weeks or a month, or what have you, but it's more long-term. So I want you all to take a few minutes, or excuse me, a few seconds, and I'll give you 60 seconds actually. And I want you to just think about what would be on your short-term list and what will be on your long-term list, and being able to identify both of those. So we'll start now. Got 30 more seconds. And time. So I hope that you learned a lot from that whole exercise of short term and long term goals. I'm now going to kind of shift into presentation. I got probably about maybe 10, 15 minutes more of it. And then I'm going to just open it up and we can go wherever you all want to go. I can share as much of my journey, and I can talk even a little bit more about that transition from when I walked across the stage at Juilliard with my degree, and like how did I actually will myself into the career that I have now? Because I get that question a lot of like, okay, I understand you've been able to accomplish all these things, but like, how did you act? Like, what was the first step? And I find that I interview people all the time. I mean, if any one of you all, if you've got anywhere near me, I will interview you and start asking you all kind of questions, because that's just I'm amazed and fascinated by people's journey. But I can tell you, as go deeper into that discovery. But I read this book called Relentless, and it's by Tim Grover, who is an incredible sports trainer, and he shaped the careers and trained people like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and these are some of the preeminent athletes of not just their careers, but like of all time. And he talks about in this book drive, and how there are three different types of drive in players in athletics. And I, for me, I love the ability to kind of cross pollinate or kind of like go into multi disciplines and pull things from other areas that are applicable to us in the creative space. And when you talk about entrepreneurship, one of the things about entrepreneurship that is fascinating to me is that it's not about who's smarter or who has access to more. People who are really incredible entrepreneurs are very persistent, and they have incredible game changing drive. Because there are many people. I mean, like Steve Jobs was actually born into an adopted, yeah, I think it was, no, sorry, Jeff Bezos was born into no, I think it was Steve Jobs was born into an adopted family. Jeff Bezos had amazing parents. You had other people, Bill Gates, that his parents were very much educators and gave him access to a building where he started first tinkering with computers. So different people will have different journeys that allow you to be exposed to certain things. But this thing about being relentless was really deep to me, and he broke it down to the kinds of careers and successes that different people will have based on their drive. So I'll just dive right into the chart. So he calls them cleaners, which is the top, the best, closers, and then coolers. And the cleaner term actually comes from him referring to Tim Grover, I'm speaking of, referring to maintenance people. Because the thing about a maintenance person is the maintenance person is there when nobody else is there, right? Even at your school now. Somebody is there on a Sunday sweeping the floors and making sure everything is clean for those that are in person to go back to school. And that's what he talks about. The highest work ethic is that cleaner, that person that is constantly exhausting themselves and working during a time that nobody else is working. So I'll just go down the chart. So first, coolers have a good game. Closers have a great season. Cleaners have unstoppable careers. Coolers take no risk. Closers take risk when they know there's a limited chance for failure. Cleaners don't worry about risk. Whatever happens, they'll figure it out. Coolers fight their dark side and lose. Closers admit their dark sides but can't control it. Cleaners harness their dark sides into raw, controlled power. Coolers do a good job and wait for a pat on the back. Closers do a good job and pat themselves on the back. Cleaners do their job because that's simply their job. It's one of my favorite ones. Coolers run from confrontation. Closers fight your battles if you give them the plan. Cleaners start wars and finish them with a victory. Coolers read the story. Closers tell the story. Cleaners change the story. Coolers avoid pressure situations. Closers step up when something is on the line and deliver in pressure situations. Cleaners, every moment is a pressure situation and everything is always on the line. Coolers are liked, closers are respected, cleaners are feared, then respected for doing what everybody else feared they do. And I have to tell you, man, when I first started reading this book, I was a closer. I was definitely a person who had a good season. I was a person who, told the story as a person who, admitted to my dark sides, couldn't control them. By the time I finished that book, I became a cleaner. And I know that it also elevated my career. And I remember when Nikki was reading my bio and saying, how in the world do I, sort of navigate all these different things, is because I'm a cleaner. I do not stop. I stop when work is done. I don't stop when I'm tired. And I find that this book really elevated my work ethic. One thing I want to kind of shift to now, we've kind of gone from the, again, just recapping, from being entrepreneurial to talent mastery, environment of mastery, tools success, all that stuff. Now I want to kind of shift more into the entrepreneurial space of branding and communication, because to be a successful entrepreneur, there are certain things within the realm of entrepreneurship that have to be dealt with and have to be approached. So I have a couple cool quotes here. One is, brand identity fuels recognition, amplifies differentiation, makes big ideas accessible, and understand you too are a brand whether you know it or not. Brand is just a perception, and a perception that will match reality over time. So I want you to know that if you are on this call or on this chat and you're in the space of being a creative, you are a brand. Whatever you do, if you're a singer, you're a drummer, you're a trumpeter, you're a teacher, whatever that is, you are a brand, which essentially is that kind of that aura that I think a brand also ties into your promise of who you are, also the contents of your product. Like if I went and said, hey, what do you all think about Professor Crawford? You may say things about him that tie to who he is, but it's really the brand that he has created around himself and his talent and his knowledge. And so I think it's important for us to understand that, which is why we have to be very careful how we present ourselves. And I want to just have a quick little detour sidebar. Students, be very careful with social media and your public presence, because now, jobs and people that are going to hire you are looking at who you are and also what you do. Before, it just used to be what you do and your resume that speaks to that in your work or your body of work. Now people are looking at, well, what do you do, your body of work, but then who are you and what do you radiate out there? So if you all of a sudden speak negatively, or if you create a lot of narrative that is very negative or political or overly political or biased or not equitable in any way, that becomes part of your brand. And there are people that, if I call out their names right now, that are well-known people, you would immediately frown, because part of their brand is a level of toxic energy or negative vibes, right? So brands are very important, but what we say about ourselves and communicate about ourselves ties into our brand. And so you want to be careful, because there may be things that you want your brand to accomplish or places you want your brand to go, but if you're communicating things that are anti what your brand is accomplishing or wants to accomplish positively, it can get in the way of that. So just understand you are a brand right now. Even if your brand is not fully developed or if it's not fully exposed, you are a brand. Next thing, part of brand, which I talk about you, is that knowledge of self-value and awareness. Making sure you have clarity of your choice, clarity of your opportunities. Make sure when you expand your brand, like when I went from being a drummer and a side person to being an educator, and then from an educator to philanthropy, make sure that you expand it from a successful and focused place. So by the time that I got into education, I'd already been successful on a certain level, which is what made people want to be educated by me. And then by the time I got into philanthropy, people trusted my education and my production and all the other things I was doing, so they were willing to fund and help me create the philanthropic project that I created. So make sure that you don't just start out day one saying, I'm going to be these 7 things, because if you're not good at either one of those things, then you won't get people to invest in anything that you're doing. So you want to make sure that a word that I've been really living by recently is excellence. So you want to make sure that whatever part of your brand you start with, whatever that entryway or that lead point to your brand is, that it's from a place of excellence, and whatever you do is executed well. And then again, your brand and that self-value and awareness is that truest part of you, that truest self, is what people remember. So when I spoke about Professor Crawford earlier, I'm going to do another exercise. I'm going to give you like 10 seconds. What do you think people remember about you? So if I want all of you all right now, write your name at the top of whatever, whether it's on your phone, your laptop, your iPad, or piece of paper. Write your name. So for me, I would say Ulysses Owens Jr. I want you all to put down 3 or 5 characteristics that you think people will say about you, like your brand. Because if we talk about Nike, what are we going to say? The swoosh, cool running shoes, great basketball shoes, whatever, right? So let's take 10 seconds, write your name across somewhere, and what are 3 to 5 characteristics that you think are part of who you are, your core, that are part of your brand? So I hope you take the time to look at that and continue to unpack that list, and even beyond unpacking, unearth new ideas about yourself. I remember when I first started my brand. As I said, my brand was just, I was a drummer, nice guy, very easy to work with people. Like, there were certain attributes that now are completely different. So continue to work on that list. As I get ready to kind of, come to a close, I have a few more slides for you, but I want you to know that there's a lot of different jobs that you can have in this world of the music industry. There's a great article that you can Google that Downbeat Magazine actually created, and it was called 50 Great Jobs for Musicians. And, there's roles within the music industry that you want to be aware of, but you can also create your own roles. But I think it'd be really great to see some of the roles that you could occupy. Because even if you don't want to be completely entrepreneurial and start your own business, you could still maybe create different roles, or find a role that already exists and be entrepreneurial within that role, which is nothing wrong with that. Not everybody on this call is going to start their own business, but some people will work as part of another business or be a key team player in someone else's goals, and that's okay as well. When I talked about earlier about making an album, recording deals are very, very, very interesting right now. And a couple things to consider: who is worthy of a recording deal? I think you have to have a conversation about who's going to be appealing to labels. It's something that I've also dealt with a lot in my career being a drummer, but there's also not a lot of record companies out there anymore. But I do think that the idea of record deals as part of entrepreneurship as an artist is something that we should talk about. Food for thought that I love, and people laugh when I put this slide up. If you're interested in having a recording career and being signed by whatever 3 record labels that are existing in the world today still, point 1, record labels have to make money from records. Point 2, record labels have to make money from records. Point 3, record labels must make money from records. And thing is that I feel that a lot of artists can get caught up in the grandeur of a record deal, which does add a certain level of legitimacy. But you have to know that if you are not an artist that can move units, or even nowadays where it's not about units, but it's about a certain level of visibility or touring when we're able to return to it, it's going to be very difficult for you to get one of those big record deals. So just really make sure, if you're an artist and you kind of want to go that traditional route as part of your path of entrepreneurship and success, you must be willing to realize that. And for some, like right now, you have a lot of artists that are actually creating their own record companies. I mean, there's a lot of, my Big Band album, which comes out next month, is actually signed to a small artist indie-based record label called Outside In Music, which is a completely cool model, and it's a different model. So just something for you all to think about for those that want to be part of that journey. Another thing that's really important as well is PR and marketing. Marketing is a battle of ideas. If you're going to succeed, you must have an idea or an attribute of your own to focus your efforts around. There's a great book as well that everybody who's going to get into entrepreneurship should definitely read this book, and it's called The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. I have a couple terms here I want you to think about. Marketing, by definition, is the promotion of a product or a resource. As artists, we promote and sell ourselves to gain a larger marketplace. Also, who's your audience? There's also the laws of leadership. The best way to market something is to be the first at something, because that'll get you attention. Being number one is unlimited potential. And I want to say very quickly with marketing as well, one thing that's very key is marketing is actually going to be the deciding factor between success. It used to be, how much money you have behind you. It used to be, all these other various things. But I find now the fact that we have social media and we all are kind of using the same resources, whether you're a large scale, big artist or someone that's indie that just started today, we're all using the same platform. Marketing is going to be that difference of the Beyoncés versus you and I, or someone where I'm at in my career and someone who just started today. Marketing is that going to be that key indicator between who has large budgets or access to a large amount of resources. Another thing that's part of, my path and definitely part of being an entrepreneur, and I think is going to be really the new wave for the new artist and the new creative entrepreneur is community engagement. I think that gone are the days of an artist kind of being trapped in this bubble and not speaking out in a certain kind of curated way about today. We all know that 2020 was a really crazy year. It was a year of not only the global pandemic, but also the pandemic of racism. 2021 has extended the pandemic of racism to xenophobia. And then also we are fighting various things around gender equity, also equity of those that want to love who they want to love. Also the ability to exist in the ways that you want to exist if you don't want to claim a gender. So I find that being able to figure out how to make your community, connection to your community through your artistry is going to be really key, because that is going to be a piece that allows a new audience to emerge from what you do. And I think it's something that people are requiring now. So Winton, in a talk that I had a chance to sit in, has some really cool things to say about community engagement. And he says it's necessary for artists to desire to be both artistic and a leader. It's also necessary for artists to have clarity and fire. It's also important to have constructive engagement as an artist. And this approach deals more with community connection than being the artist specifically. So I do want you all on that list of those questions that you answered earlier about what kind of success you want, and even your branding and communication and all that. Like, how do you want to show up for your community? Within your surrounding community, like, how do you think your art can influence and impact the people that are around you? For instance, that was something that being at Don't Miss a Beat and creating it was the first time that I had to say, like, who cares about your fancy little Juilliard degree? Like, how can you get in a room and transform it with your story and your journey and connect to each and every person in that room? So I do want to encourage people and caution you in the same tone that I think we need to figure out how to engage creatively with what we're doing with our community. And I think it will allow us to have a lifespan to our career that we wouldn't necessarily have otherwise. Couple things to think about as we come to a close is there is a mental side of being a musician and a creative. This time in 2021 and 2020, I think has challenged our mental state. I know a lot of musicians right now and creatives who are battling depression, battling anxiety, and it's okay. And I think it's time for us artists to stop hiding behind our careers and to really come forward and be honest about it. So a chapter that I also have in the book is it talks a lot about the mental side of being a musician, because as I say here, you cannot have a positive life and a negative mind. And this kind of gets into sort of the self-help space, which people may say, okay, Ulysses, why the heck are you talking about sort of this kind of, higher holistic sense merged with entrepreneurship? But it does matter. Being an entrepreneur is a very mentally taxing thing. Operating in 2021, in the lieu of wearing face masks all day and not being able to engage with our family and friends. And do you take the vaccine? For those that don't want to take the vaccine, where we are politically, are you left? Are you right? Are you Republican, Democrat, independent? There's all these things that can create to a very negative, draining mindset. And so I want you to know that having the right kind of mindset, or even being tuned in to your mental state, is going to allow you to be able to also create the kind of success you want. So a few points here: the clearer your mind, the easier your instrument is, or the easier it will be to express yourself on your instrument. Being a musician requires a lot of mental focus and conditioning. Also, technical challenges can stem from mental blocks based on personal and musical insecurities. I'll tell you a very quick story. I remember being in Paris teaching a student a few years ago, and he's very, very talented, but he was struggling with this pattern. And so I said to him, I said, man, like try it again. I sat on the drums, I played it. He got on, couldn't play. I said, okay, put the drumsticks down. He said, all right. I said, man, what's going on in your head right now? And he said, I'm very nervous. You're someone I admire, and I'm really nervous, and I just feel it's hard for me to play in front of you. I said, well, first of all, let's do this. You can play in front of me. I'm your friend. I'm not your enemy. I'm your teammate. I'm your coach, wrapped up into one. And he says, okay. And so I had him repeat some mantras, some things just like, hey, I'm going to be successful. When I play, there are no mental blocks. I'm very big into affirmations. So I had him do all of that. I said, all right, pick the sticks up. He got right to the thing that he was trying to get to. And so I want to say that to say, for all of you all, even some of your technical challenges that you may be having right now may be from, again, some personal or musical insecurities that are tying in to the physical. Because understand, this is all connected. That mind is connected to the limbs and connected to the voice and connected to our breathing and all the stuff that affects our instrument. So if we're not clear mentally, it's going to be very difficult for us to access that clarity in our instrument. Fear is evolved to faith when men and women become reliant on the divine rather than social intervention. I'm not here to tell people what to believe in, but I do think that ability to cling on to something greater than yourself allows you to be able to navigate those very difficult moments. So as we move forward, I go back to mastery. What is mastery? It's a comprehensive knowledge in an area or skill, your ability and expertise without question, and I always ask, end with the question of, do you ever question that John Coltrane can play the horn? The question is, no. Do you question, can Herbie Hancock play the piano? or Chick Corea, who just left us, or anybody who's out there in the world that is incredible at what they do. That mastery is something that shifts you from being what you hope to be to what you desire to be. And as I close, I want to end with what I like to call the 5 keys of entrepreneurship that I've created, which is, what do you want? How will you obtain it? And assessing the current relationships. And that's something that I didn't create a slide for relationships, but there's a whole section and chapter in my book about relationships, because I find that everything you will ever need, and someone told me this years ago, everything you will ever need in life will come through the form of a relationship. Even where you all sit, there is a relationship or a partnership or friendship or a colleague that whispered something or said something to you or sent you an email that got you to this specific space. And so what you want to obtain will be obtained as you assess whatever current relationships that you have. Third, what will you leverage or invest to obtain it? And it's important to know, whatever you want to do and be successful, it's going to require investment of time and energy and money from what you have. And even if you say, well, Ulysses, I don't have a lot of money. Cool, I don't have it either. I mean, it's a pandemic. But even if you don't have money, you're going to have to invest energy and time and what we call sweat equity, that rolling your sleeves up and giving to what it is that you want to accomplish. The other thing is, how will you maximize what you're obtaining, and who do you know that can help you maximize, which goes back to the relationships. Because I always say there may be something that you want to accomplish, but there may also be a person that's already accomplished it. So you could just talk to them and figure out how can you get their help. And then lastly, how will you share it with the world? So as I come to the end of this presentation, I want to first thank you all for your patience. Thank you all for being listeners. But I want you to know, and I'm very, 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 very adamant about this, you can and will accomplish whatever you want to accomplish. If you don't, it's because you stood in your own way. But it's going to take some work. It's going to take some strategizing, some visualizing, and building relationships and investing of your time and your energy. But also that ability to say, what is my talent? What is the environment of mastery? And then how can I, over time, become a master, or at least possess levels of mastery in what I do? So thank you so much. I'm really happy to explore and answer any questions. Nikki, I'm going to turn it back over to you and Andy, but hope you all enjoyed my presentation.
Well, hello. Welcome. I'm saying welcome back, even though you've been here the whole time. I'm welcoming myself back. Thank you, Ulysses. That was incredible, and it was so much to think about, which is, of course, a great selling tactic for the book, because my sense is that all of these incredibly powerful ideas that you've just given to us, you unpack and engage with in even more detail in the book. And so hopefully people are hungry for more of that, and we'll get a little bit more of that now in our Q&A. But I think we are very lucky to have heard your take on this, which is also so positive. You've given us so much information, and it can feel overwhelming. I know, especially for some of our students who are thinking about all of these things that are now on their to-do list, right? To your point about lists. But I just appreciate that you frame it all in a way that suggests that these are all things that can empower students, musicians, creative people. I mean, and everything you're talking about transcends beyond music too, to any field or career that you want to realize, and that it really does put the power in somebody's hand. I have a bunch of questions, and we're going to get questions. I've already got some stuff coming up in the chat, but I'm thinking particularly about students or young musicians who are starting out, and I think a lot of people feel that they should be the people creating all of their own content as far as kind of managing their brand. And that can be, if people are multi-talented and they're good writers and they're good graphic designers, they can write their website content and design a beautiful website. Some people are great players behind an instrument, but not great public speakers, and so they freeze up on the mic, or are not natural in speaking in the way that that you are. What advice do you have for young musicians who might feel overwhelmed about thinking, I'm really good at my instrument, I've worked really hard on it, but I'm a terrible writer, or I don't know how to design a good website? Like, how do you kind of tease that out so that it doesn't feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders to accomplish some of the things that you've outlined here?
One quick statement that I tell people all the time. Build a team. I will tell you, even from this presentation is all of my information. I write it. I'm not a designer, but I have an amazing graphic designer who designs my keynotes and designs my presentations. I send them all the information. Hey, this is everything from literally slide 1, 2, 3, whatever. But if you put me in PowerPoint, I couldn't tell you what to do. But I have people who that's what they do, right? But to your point, I am a good writer and I know how to design the scope of a presentation, and I'm a public speaker, right? So I would say for everything that you don't know how to do, assess what you do know how to do, right? So I know, like I said, I know how to write presentations, I know how to write, but like I had never written a book. So I called Arlen, or I got, in touch with Arlen through another friend because I was talking about this book, right? And Arlen took it from being, sort of a journal to a really thorough book and textbook. Same thing with my website. I have a graphic person who has been with me for over 5 years. He does everything from my social media flyers to my website to, he's the first person I went to and was like, hey, Chris, I want to create a visual brand that everything I do is consistent. He's like, okay, great. Again, I've never been to design school. I've never worked at a company as a graphic designer, but Chris has over 30 years of experience. So I go back to that first statement, build a team, and build a team around your weaknesses and your strengths. So if I know, like I could tell you 20 things I'm really, really good at, and I can also tell you 20 things I'm not good at. For every one of those 20 things I'm not good at, I have somebody who's not only good, but they are way smarter than I will ever be, right? I'm not a really good editor. I love to write. I can write all day long. I have really great copy editors. I have great proofreaders, and I say that to say, I know some people will say, well, what if you don't have money? How do you build a team? Well, the beautiful thing about being in college is that there's always something the other person needs that you can barter, right? So if you're really good at speaking, but that person is good at editing, you may say, hey, you know what, let me help you with this and you help me with that. But I think that concept of building a team is something you can start right now, even with no money involved. But what the beautiful thing to me about building a team is that you acknowledge when you come to the end of yourself. And so to your point, I think those that are really, really, really successful, they build teams. And the one thing I will tell you, I know I'm really good at building a team. And I know how to assemble people together to accomplish a goal. So again, if you're struggling at something, stop being prideful, stop being arrogant, stop being shameful or shamed by not being good at everything. We weren't designed to be good at everything, but build that team around your weaknesses and your strengths. And at that point, there's nothing you won't be able to accomplish.
I think that's incredible advice and so apt. I think about our students at Knox who are in a liberal arts education where they are surrounded by people who are going to be outstanding. They're going to be politicians. They're going to be novelists. They're going to be economists. So if you're terrible at numbers and bookkeeping, like I am, then don't spin your wheels on the thing you're not good at. Right? Be really really honest with yourself about it. Speaking of our students, I want to encourage everyone who's both here in the webinar and joining us on the YouTube live stream to please feel free to throw comments in the chat, or if you're here in the webinar, you can raise your hand and you can use your human voice to speak to us if you would like. Daniel, who is a multi-saxophonist in our ensembles, commented here in the chat. It's not a question so much as a thank you, but he said, thank you for your enlightening presentation from a musician's perspective. We often forget that musicianship and entrepreneurship are hand in hand. Music is meant to be listened to by people and not limited to a practice room with four walls. I also really enjoyed the nuanced difference between mastery and talent. We must continue working towards mastery, and it takes hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. And I love that he, when he mentioned, there's something I caught in his first paragraph, but he mentions your comment about the difference between talent and mastery, and you had said you had more to say about that. Maybe if we wanted to go there, I wonder. And you had mentioned, I put it in my notes too because I was taking notes while you were talking. Hobbies, talent, and gifts. You had talked about that kind of three-part system. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about how you think about those, the relationship between those. Yeah.
Sure, I wanted to make one comment, Nikki, to something you said that was really profound, and then I'll go into those points. You made a comment about the students that are at this liberal arts college and how many of them will become, politicians and all these other things, right? I want to tell you that is so key because it was the same thing at Juilliard. Everybody, like, I can't tell you, there's not a day I sit on my couch and watch TV or see a commercial and I don't see someone I went to school with. And I remember my first day of convocation, Dr. Polisi literally said to us, he said, look to your right and look to your left. And we did it. And he said, these are people that you will probably see and work with the rest of your life. And so I say that to say same thing for you, Nikki, and your students, because you have future amazing novelists and politicians or whomever, make those relationships now because there are people now like one of my friends, she's on one of the leading sitcoms right now. I called her, I was like, hey, I got one of my kids who's about to audition for Juilliard. Can you help me? And she's like, absolutely. Yeah, I didn't have to call our agent. I didn't have to do anything because we were both in that place grinding it out, right? Like we were both trying to work our careers out in school. So for all of you all right now who are working alongside other people, take note because that connection will never lose. It'll only get stronger. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. The other piece when you talked about talent versus mastery, absolutely. I think today's generation, we obsess over talent. So even right now, like, there's like somebody emailed me the other day, there's a really talented young lady. Her name is Nandi Bushnell, I think. She's a cute little mixed girl. She's a drummer and I think a guitarist, and she's got all these millions and millions of YouTube subscribers. And they're like, oh my God, Ulysses, we want to get you and Nandi on a call. And I was like, I think she's amazing, but I was like, I'm more interested in seeing what happens to Nandi 10 years from now. I worked with Jolie Alexander, who was a literal gift from God at 11. I mean, this guy was playing like Chick Corea at 11 years old, and accessing parts of music at 11 years old. Now he's 18 and he's an adult, and now he's really finding his way. So talent doesn't amaze me, but mastery does, because mastery to me speaks to sustainability, right? Sustainability is what we all want. That doesn't come from talent. Because I'll tell you right now, most of those YouTube sensations, or even, how many times have we seen, an E-News segment on child stars, right? And, they had this one really a great moment, but they weren't able to take that moment and maximize and leverage it because that moment almost created a really like trapped them in a sense, because they as they went forward 10 years from now, they were always stuck with what people recognize. So I think mastery is much better because mastery again will lead to sustainability. And then the last question you had about the hobby, the gifts, I think it was gifts, hobbies, and what was the other one? It was gift,
Gifts,
gift,
yeah,
gift.
talent, hobbies, and gifts, or at least that's how you mentioned it in your talk.
So I think Robert broke it down. It was really deep. So he talked about like a hobby could be that thing that like you're into. So he was like, for him, he's really into cooking, So it's something that is his hobby. It's not something that he's gifted at, but it's a hobby that he loves. And then I think another thing was passion. So it was actually hobby, passion, gift. Then he said passion is something that he's passionate about, like TV. He said he really loves TV. He loves shows. He's always into a new show. He said, and he's passionate about it. He said, but the thing about a gift is something that he doesn't have to work hard at. He said, and many of us are stuck in between a hobby. We've given our life to a hobby, which is something that we love, but it doesn't necessarily need to be something we need to have a career at. Or we're very passionate about something, but our gift may not lie in that passion. But then the gift is the thing that we single-handedly don't really have to work hard at. Like for you, you may be, I'm sure you're a gifted educator, which means, you should prep your assignments, but if you didn't, you probably could go in there and still riff and give students what they need because it's something that you're gifted at. And so he said one of the key things to success is us actually taking the time to shift from operating on our hobbies and our passions and focusing on our gifts. So have your hobbies, have your passions, but where you should put your energy is in your gift, because the thing that is easy for you to do is the thing that you're gifted to do. And if you put your energy into that thing, that will take you beyond. So anyway, that's something I think that I always like to share, because I find that I meet people in their careers that are stuck in between their passions and their hobbies. They're really like, man, I want to be an actor, but they're not really good at it, but they're really gifted to work on cars. And instead of working on cars, they're struggling and they haven't made any money, and they've been living like sort of this sort of life that is beneath their privileges because they keep putting their energy in their passion or their hobby. There's somebody who their hobby is collecting baseball cards and they spend all day doing that, but that's not their gift. And so I find that people that are living at the way that they want to live are those that are able to live and put their energy into their gift. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. And it doesn't create a value system where your passion is less important than your gift. Sometimes the passion is the thing that you don't want to have your financial well-being attached to, right? It can kill the passion and so it doesn't put those things in a hierarchy, which I think is important. But that's also a hard thing to figure out for all of us, and it's an evolving thing because you may be very emotionally attached to the idea that this is the thing you're going to do, and realize and maybe conflicted about your gift, but realize, wow, if I put my energy into my gift, that's really what's going to pay off, and then I still have my hobby and my passion, and it allows me to have those things too.
And I have to say very quickly, a key to my own success, Nikki, has been that hard. I want to mention a term here that I love to use a lot, and that's what I like to call mirror conversations. I think we have to, all of us, throughout our life, have these mirror conversations where we stand in front of the mirror and we have a real one on one of like, hey man, or hey lady, or hey whatever, like this is where we are. And I think I did that about 5 years ago, and it's what led me to this work. And I will tell you that when I started working in the area of my gift, all these doors and things just started opening up because there was a space for me. So I want to say, for those of you all that may be experiencing some level of difficulty, really check, to your point, there's not a hierarchy, but make sure that you're not fighting to make something work that may not be a natural gift. So I just wanted to, I had to have that mirror conversation with myself. I don't want people to think that I just rolled out of bed and it was just working. Like like I'm constantly a work in progress. So
Yeah, that's the only problem is you make it look too easy.
plus,
But that's part of your gift too. So I had a question here that came into one of our chats, and you speak to this a little bit, but this is clearly coming from a student perspective. What do you wish you had spent more time or less time on in college as a musician, as thinking about where you are now, what you wanted to do?
I think I was very focused in college, so I have no. I was literally telling a friend that today. Like I had no social life. So I don't think I didn't use my time wisely. What I think I would have done more of is I wish I would have probably saved more money. Not that I made a lot of money, but I think I wish that I would have been more savvy financially, and made better decisions financially in college. And then I think the only other thing would have probably been working on my skills as a composer because again, my gift has never been composition. So I think those are the two things I would have done more because again, when you're in college, you have a lot of free time. And then I probably would have worked on playing piano more because I find that there are some things that like if I was composing now, there are even more grants that I could apply for. There are even other ways that I could expose my talent to the world if I was stronger at composing. But again, that's not my, like, I'm not going to be great at everything. So I can't say that I regret it, but I do think that it would have been something that could have been cool. But I think that financial piece is definitely a regret of like, I wish I would have been smarter. Like, say, I grew up in a family where we didn't talk about money. Um, and in our house, my mother always had a good job. My father had a good job, and they definitely took care of us. And I'm thankful. I always ate. I always had a good place to lay my head. But my parents never really took me behind the scenes and said, okay, this is what a credit score is, or this is what credit cards are, or this is what it is. If you're gonna open up a business one day, you're gonna maybe need to apply for a business loan, or like they never talked about that entrepreneurial stuff that became my life. So I think if there was ever a regret, is that I wish I would have had financial mentors in my life at 20, 21, or 19 saying, hey, Ulysses, be thinking about these things now. Or you know what? Don't go get that credit card and buy a bunch of stupid stuff because, in 10 years from now, you're going to actually have a business at 24, 25 when most of your friends are just going to college spring break. Like, you're going to actually have a business. And if you have money saved, you can power those businesses. And I will say that I still had the businesses and I still made things happen. It just, I was a little bit more stressed out than I would have liked to be. So, yeah, that's a piece that I wish I would have had. So I see.
And you are so right. We don't. I mean, I think about even running a program from my side, we don't talk about this enough to our students. Probably because people didn't talk to us about it. Everything you're describing sounds very much like where I was when I got out of college. And actually, that Andy chimed in with a question. You talked about financial skills as a musician and an adult that you wish you were covered in college. What skills have you developed that you think are the most important that would do us and our students well at a younger age? Like things that they should be thinking about, or on the most practical side of things.
Great, and I have all of this in the book as well. So for me, a couple things. One, I think we should talk about credit, right? Because if you and you know this, if you're going to run, and I mean even right now with the pandemic, there are people who, because they had credit or businesses, they were able to apply for additional funding, right? I mean, yeah, you had people that got the stimulus check, but if you had a business, you could get SBA loans, you could get PPP, and those were larger amounts than just a simple few $100s, right? So I think the first thing, I wish someone would have said, okay, Ulysses, one, let's talk about taxes. If once you get to a certain point, for instance, where you make above $50,000 or even $35,000 as a single entity, you're going, and I should say, $35 to $50,000 of untaxed income, right? Because most of us that are creatives, we're making untaxed income. So I wish someone would have said something like, hey, learn to save, 30% or 40% of whatever you make. Put some of it in an account for whatever, and then another should just live in an account so when your tax bills come, you'll be ready. So that's something that I think everybody should know is the tax thing, because I end up having, thankfully I have a great accountant now, but there was a period of time where I had some tax issues. And it was simply because I went from, like when I started working with Kurt Elling, I went from like struggling and living sort of kind of hand to mouth, under $30,000 to within 2 years, I got a job with Kurt Elling, Nicholas Payton, and Christian McBride. So I went from, struggling to working with three of the most top jazz artists. So I went from literally one tax bracket to I shifted two tax brackets up. So I went from 30 to like six figures in a matter of like less than a year. And I never, my mom made six figures towards the end of her career. I was making six figures when I was like 28, so nobody said, hey nut, like you should probably save money, and so I remember one day being out on a date, trying to be a big baller, and giving them my credit card, and they came back to me and they're like, oh, Mr. Owens, your card is declined. And I'm like, well, there's money in there. Like I knew there was like several thousands of dollars in my bank account. So they're like, I'm sorry. I go and look, and there's a red line and it says, please call the IRS. And it was because I had hired an accountant who had filed employment taxes or whatever, and as a result of it, I didn't know that, because you have to file for whoever you pay, and as a result, I had a balance out there that I was unaware of. So here I was, I paid my federal taxes. I lived in New York, so I paid my state taxes. So I did all of that. But then I had these SEP whatever fees, and it was like $1,200. It wasn't even anything like to write home about, but it froze thousands of dollars, and I never knew what that was like to literally be in a position where I had money in the bank, but I could not access it. So long story short, I got through it, paid it all off, and also fired that accountant and got another accountant. but just that idea of taxes. So I think that's the first thing we should talk about. I think we should also talk about money management. One of my dreams when I'm able to run one of my dreams is to run a creative entrepreneurship department at a college. I teach it across the country at various colleges, but I actually want to run a creative entrepreneurship division. And one of the things that I want to do is create incubators and be able to create different assignments. And one of the assignments that I would love to be able to create is a money management assignment, where literally we create like a fake checkbook, and we go to each student and we say, all right, you get 10 of you all get $5,000, and this is the project, and we need you to submit balance sheets, check in with us, do budget meetings, and let me know when the project is done, do you all have any money left? Do you all have half of it left? Or did you not spend any money? Because I think that idea of, especially once I got my production company, when, people would come to me with, $2,500 budgets or $10,000 budgets or whatever, learning how to manage that money is a real big thing. So yeah, taxes, I would say learning business entity and structures, again, according to taxes, and then money management. And then I think another thing that is really key, which is in the book, is fundraising. Mark Cuban says I think I heard a quote that I read or something. He said, you know, the person that's going to really be successful today is the person that knows how to raise money. If you know how to raise money, no matter what field you're in, you're going to be very, very successful, because the ability to raise money is the ability to be persuasive, the ability to have a goal and reach that goal, the ability to build networks and relationships. I mean, like, to raise $500 is no small feat. And I find that if you know how to do that, then you can build a business. So those are probably some of the areas that I think could be taught and addressed.
Well, first of all, I love the creative entrepreneurship idea. So let's, if our administrators at Knox are watching, maybe Knox could be the home for that. That'd be beautiful, amazing. Just putting that out there. But it'd be cool to have you on campus with us all the time. I really appreciate that you talk so openly and transparently about finances and money. A lot of musicians and creative folks are nervous to do that. There's a lot of like shame and guilt and this sense that we're scared of it because we weren't taught about it. We feel like it's crass to talk about the fact that what we do makes money, which of course is then used against us to not pay artists what they're worth, right? And I actually had a question that our students did not submit it, but I'm asking it on their behalf because it's something that I've seen with a lot of students. And it's that a lot of young musicians, and I've seen this a lot of times, especially with students that graduate, say, from our program and then go out into the world and start working professionally, semi-professionally as performers. They have difficulty knowing how to negotiate fees for their work. And this it's a more specific question, but it dovetails off of, what the doors that you just opened, I think. And I wonder what kind of advice you have for people, particularly when they're starting out, because I think there's this tension between really wanting to get yourself out there, get exposure, but also needing to pay bills, and also back to establishing a brand. Like you set some value for yourself and your work early on, even in those days where you're happy to get the $25 gig. So I wonder if you have any advice about how to negotiate that, particularly for people who they've been in college where nobody was paying them for anything. All of a sudden, they are their own manager, probably, unless they're super lucky and walk out with a manager at 22, which doesn't happen to many people. So how did you think about that, or how do you advise young musicians about that?
So the first thing I want to share with you about is that money conversation. Money is a very sensitive subject, but I stand by this. If somebody is afraid to talk about money, I question their motive. Now, I do think that there are levels of engagement, and I think there's levels of respect. So particularly when you're a young musician and you're talking to an older musician who's taking a chance on you and hiring you, I think you have to be very creative about how you do it. Like, I remember when I started a band and a business in Japan many years ago, I did a lot of stuff there, particularly for about 5 years. There were even these rules societally, because it was a co-led band with myself and Takeshi Obayashi, that Takeshi could not, as a young 26, 27-year-old Japanese young man, he could not talk to our boss, who was in his 60s, about money. Like, there was actually a rule, but because I was the American, I was able to have conversations with him. So I do like that, in that we have to be careful. And I will just say, for the record, I never, especially within the first few years, when all these great band leaders called me, whatever they decided to pay me, I took. So I'm not, I don't sit down, I wasn't sitting down with Kurt Elling when he said he wanted to hire me and be the first person to give me a steady gig. And I asked him what it would pay, like what gigs would pay, so that I could just know. But I wasn't like, yeah, Kurt, I think you should go up $50 more. Like, no. Like, Kurt Elling he's still such a dear friend. I was just honored that he called me. And same thing when Christian started calling me, his manager already had a fee structure. Same thing with Winton or any of the other people. So most artists that you're going to work with, even if you all work with me, you're going to have that fee structure, or they're going to have a fee structure. And also, it's important for you to know, and the pandemic is going to jack all this up for us, is that a lot of the fee structure is around venues, right? So I don't care. It could be Pat Metheny, if you're playing smalls, there, even for Pat Metheny, there's a cap of what they can pay Pat Metheny because it's smalls. So though he's probably going to make more money than anybody else that ever played smalls, it's still going to be a lower scale. So he may not be able to pay you what you think he could pay you versus if you guys play Shea Stadium, right? Like, so I think one thing that I would encourage students to know in your negotiating, consider the venue and consider the scale of the gig you're playing. But the first thing I'll say to you, to me, and this may sound old school, if you're at a certain age, I don't think you should be negotiating anything. I think at a certain point from the age, I did not really start negotiating fees with people until I had multiple work. So when I was sitting down and being like, okay, I'd been in Kurt's band a while, and then I had other things that I was doing. So people would be like, well, Ulysses, we want you to do this gig, but I already had committed to Kurt. Then I'm like, well, I already have a steady job. So if you want me to go to Kurt and talk to him and ask him, can I bring a substitute for me? Then you've got to pay me a certain amount of money because I'm already happy somewhere, you know? So I think negotiation to me should come to the table when you have multiple things that you're juggling, because then it becomes a matter of you're asking people to pay for time that has already been pre-reserved, you know, or been preserved rather. So I think the negotiating thing is tricky. I also think you should negotiate from a place of how do I say this, of humility and not from a place of ego. So even when I ask for a lot of money, like now, like when I, you know, if I have students come to me and they say, oh my God, I want to take a lesson, my fee for lessons is not cheap. But I don't say, oh, you know, I'm Ulysses, I charge you this much. My thing is that hour you want me to spend talking to you about you, I could be spending writing another book. I could be spending building a creative entrepreneurship department. I could be doing something for Ulysses. So my time now, I always say to people, I play and teach for free. My time is not free. So I charge for my time. So my time as I've gotten older has become way more expensive because I just have less of it. So I think the negotiating should really come from that place of, hey man, you're asking me to give you a certain amount, or hey lady, you're asking me to give you a certain amount of time, and that time is expensive. But I honestly think at a certain point, your student shouldn't be worried about the take, as Christian McBride said to me, because I used to ask him these questions. He'd say, son, take everything that comes. And it's true, take everything that comes. And then once you got more than enough on the plate, then you can decide all that other stuff. But for most of y'all, I don't think that'll be an issue for a while, especially now, given the pandemic. But I think Andy's asking here, he's saying, oh, okay, so they're talking about booking gigs at a restaurant, bar. How do I value stuff? Okay, so I'll just say this. Restaurant owners, like record labels, have to make money. And most of the time, when they book particularly student groups, most of the time they're losing money. Because if they're guaranteeing you, you know, let's say you have a trio and they're going to guarantee you $150, which is $50 a person, that means before they have opened up their doors or sold a glass of wine or sold an appetizer, they are already on the hook for $150. Plus, they're on the hook for their bar staff, you know, their bar back. Like, so already they're on the hook for $500-600 because of just you and their staff before they've opened up their doors. So I think what I've always done is I prefer steady work versus getting paid a lot for one night. So for instance, I have a jam session right now. I'm not going to disclose how much they're paying me, but I will tell you they're not paying me enough to pay my rent. But I'd rather have steady gigs, a steady gig over time. So for your students, if you're going to go to a restaurant, I think you have to look at how much money that restaurant feels that they're going to make from you being there. If you're positioned near the bar and you feel like you've been playing at this place for a month and you can barely even get in there to set up your gear and the bar is just overly crowded, and you know, within 3 hours you can look at that bar and be like, man, I feel like they made like a couple grand and people didn't start showing up till the music happened, then I think you're in a position to go to the bar, to the person and say, hey, I love where I'm at and I really want to continue being here. Is there a way that we can notch up the fee? But what I will say is you want to be careful how you negotiate your first fee, because most of these restaurant owners, they're going to lock you in to whatever you initially agreed. Because the other thing is that most of you all will get locked in, and if you all of a sudden want more money, they'll just fire you and go hire another band that'll do it for less money. So that's why I say most of you students don't have a lot of leverage, because for everything that you won't do, there's another group of students that will do it. So I think, so booking your own gigs at restaurants, in general, you're not going to make a lot of money at a restaurant. You're not going to make a lot of money at a bar. Where you're going to make more money is doing private parties. And I think when you do private parties, that's when, you ask them what is their budget, and maybe you can figure out ways to create a new fee structure. But again, I would also talk to your mentors, talk to your professors and say, hey, I got this gig and I don't know what to charge. What do you suggest? And then they can even be more helpful, because I can't speak to it because I don't live in your city. So I don't know your market, value. But typically I would just say you're not gonna make a lot of money at a restaurant, but the space by which you will make more money is in the private gig, private home, or even a person that rented out a restaurant, because they're gonna have much more money to pay than a restaurant paying you every week.
Yeah, and I think you're right and I was thinking when you're talking about the long-term sustained gig, you're also kind of mapping your brand onto the restaurant or bar's brand, right? And so then you become more valuable to them because you are now part of their identity if things are going well. If not, then it's a different situation.
Also, I saw Andy's message as well about, too many students play for free and that hurts the industry. I mean, I agree, but I don't agree. Your students playing for free don't affect me because I'm not them. If your student can play for free all day long, but if they want me, they're gonna pay me. So I to me, what I think hurts the industry is when students don't do a good job, and a lot of these students show up, they look like crap, they disrespect the staff, they show up late, or they don't play musically, they play too loud. So that's what messes up the gig to me, is the morale. Because if you have a student that shows up, they look good, they play well, they start on time, they end on time, that manager of that restaurant is going to fight to keep them because they're drawing in a good audience. Chances are most of these students are not bringing in more people. If anything, they're becoming a liability for the restaurant. So I don't think that people playing for free messes up the industry, because I've never had to work for free unless I wanted to. So I think what messes up the industry is the level and the quality by which most students do things. And then that makes people say, well, you know what, man, these students, they were such a drag last week. They didn't start on time. You know what? We're not going to have music at all at the restaurant. That to me is what affects the industry. And then to your point, if the restaurant tries to screw over what they charge for music, when you have another student go in there and play for less money, that's what messes up the industry to me. So.
Yeah, it's remembering the second that you are off campus, and even when you're on campus, but the second you're off campus playing in any venue, you are a professional musician, and that this goes back to your point about talent. That talent gets you a certain way, part of the way there, but who you are to work with. It's the same thing with bandmates, right? The people that you want to keep making music with. You may make music with somebody who's not quite as talented as somebody you played with 3 weeks ago, but this is somebody who shows up on time, who's always supportive and really making the environment better for everybody. I mean, that's what people want, whether it's a restaurant gig or playing on the bandstand with somebody else, right? That's what we're all looking for, I think.
And the last thing I'll say too, Nikki, that changed my life was when I became a business owner, and when I became a booker of a club, and when I became an owner of a nonprofit and I had to book musicians. I showed up to gigs way different. And I think one of the things, and again, this goes back to building, an entrepreneurship space for students, is I think most students need to put themselves on the other end. Like they need to, give that student $100 or $150 and say, hire your friends, and hire them for your family's dinner, and see, if that friend says, well, man, I know you're giving me $150, but man, can I get $200? And you say to your friend, would you give them extra money, or would you say, you know what, I hear you, I'm gonna go call my other friend, right? So I find that what helps people become better at what they do is to put themselves in the same shoes. And most of us don't play both roles. I play multiple roles, and so now when people call me, I show up on time because I have businesses where I hire staff and I hire people, and I want them to give me that same respect. So I give to others what I hope people give to me. So I think that, again, is something that students should have an opportunity to do, is, again, put them in the position of power, and they'll understand those club owners and venue owners a lot easier being in their position versus always being on the other end.
It's amazing how powerful empathy is. It can solve a lot of problems, right?
Quickly.
Yes, yes. Um, And I can't believe that we are at time. I did have one other question that I know our students, Knox students, are very socially aware and motivated. We have a huge placement in the Peace Corps, so our students are very interested in community outreach and stuff like that. And so I know this is slightly off topic from the topic of your presentation, but I think it's something that our students would be really interested in hearing a little bit more about the Don't Miss a Beat organization. I'd love for you to share a little bit about why you started that, what it does, because I think that's a really interesting model for the kind of work that a lot of our students are thinking about, allied to music and the creative arts too.
So Don't Miss a Beat was an interesting journey. What happened? I'll consolidate it. When I was at Juilliard, I toured Japan and we toured Costa Rica. And when I was at Costa Rica, we performed at what's called a cultural center. So it was deep because in Japan we performed at all these fancy concert halls. In Costa Rica, it was this cultural center that families bought, Tupperware dishes. They laid blankets on the ground, and they watched us. And I was like, it was this social element and familial thing with us. And I was like, man, like it moved me. And so I kind of put something in the back of my mind. I was like, man, I'd love to start something like this in Jacksonville one day. So fast forward, when I graduated college, I had no work. So I was like, okay, let me go back to Jacksonville. And I actually had a colleague of mine who worked at Jacksonville University, and he said, hey, why don't you come here? I can get you an adjunct position. So I started teaching there. During that time, a lot of my family were going through like early retirement. And so we had worked at a lot of churches. We had built a lot of youth ministries at a lot of churches. So we were like, well, we know we want to do something like with youth, because I had come to them. I was like, yo, we need to create our own family business. Because what would happen was every time we created something for a church, if the pastor left, they would sort of take it with them, right? So I was like, we need to create something that is self-sustaining, that nobody can take from us. So we knew we wanted to do that. And then at the same time, Jacksonville had an incredibly high crime rate. And when we did all the data and research, we found that crime was being committed from particularly teens that were between like 13 and like 18, and teens of color. And they were also a demographic of teens that were getting in trouble at school, getting in fights. They would get suspended. When they went home, of course, they weren't talking to any teachers or interfacing. They would then go back to school, be behind in their work, and then not be motivated to stay. And so then they would drop out. So initially, Don't Miss a Beat was going to be a hub and a center where those students would come during their suspension and they wouldn't miss a beat. And we would educate them and keep them up to speed with their work. And then they would go back to school and be cool. Well, we didn't get the grant. So we were disappointed, but we were like, all right, we gotta persist. So my mom went down, found a bid for summer camps, and she said, hey, there's a bid for like a summer camp from the Jacksonville Children's Agency or Commission. What do you think you want to do? So I thought back to like my high school days. I went to a high school of the arts, and we would do this thing called Extravaganza, which was like a multidisciplinary show for the community at the end of the year. And then like we would charge and whatever for it. So I was like, man, what if we educate these kids for like 8 weeks, taught them music, dance, and drama, and at the end we put on our own musical? Well, we got the grant. So the city put us literally in it's called the Hollybrook Projects of Jacksonville, a very rough neighborhood. And they were like, y'all ain't gonna last a week. We went there. Not only did we last, but everybody in the community got involved with us. We had even the people that were quote unquote considered the dregs of society. They were helping us. They were assisting us. And we performed this original musical. And the Children's Commission said, what the heck did you do? There was no crime in the area while we were there. And I said to them, they're people like anybody else. We didn't go in there afraid. We just said, hey, we want to help your kids and we want to do something positive. But we also gave them something to do. So we did that, and the city said, oh my God, we want to send you to another place. So we did it in another area. And so essentially Don't Miss a Beat operates 3 programs. One is our flagship summer camp, which has now turned into the Broadway edition, the Broadway Experience Summer Edition. So now every summer we do a 6-week summer camp, and we end it with a Broadway musical. So this year we're doing In the Heights. So because I wanted kids to start getting Broadway credits, so that if they want to go to college and major in musical theater or whatever, they could have that. So we have the Broadway edition. Then we also have our after school, what's called the Don't Miss a Beat Academy of Arts, where kids can get free arts instruction Monday through Friday in the areas of music, dance, yoga, drama, and visual art. And then we have an after school homework assistance, which helps those kids get their grades up. So literally, a kid leaves school, their bus drops them off to Don't Miss a Beat about 3:30, 4 o'clock. They get their homework done, and then they go into their Academy of Art discipline, and then they get snack. We feed them, we give them dinner, and they leave at 7 o'clock. So it's a full time thing. It's 365 days a year, and we are a beacon in the community. And then on top of that, we are also an arts presenter. Like this year, we're starting our first ever Don't Miss a Beat Jazz Festival. We present, the musical every year. We also had another concert series where we presented like 12 concerts from dance and all that. So we're also a space where these people, amazing people in community, can come and be able to get access to the arts because they can't pay for it. And the other part of it is high level artistry. So I have tons of my Juilliard colleagues and people from all over the world, like even Broadway. I have Broadway sound techs come in. I got people that have been on Broadway working with these amazing kids. And the goal, as we say, is for the arts to be a bridge to a better life. And so if that kid becomes the next Mozart or Misty Copeland or whomever, cool. But the real goal is that they will have committed themselves from ages 5 to 15 or 16 to our organization. And from that, they have a community and a system and a village of people that believes in them and then helps them. Because our ultimate goal is for them to go to college, because we believe they go to college and they can change their whole community. So that is essentially Don't Miss a Beat.
I think that's incredible, and I think that is such a testament to the fact that you allude to in your talk too about how your passion for music and the arts might not lead to a professional full-time performing career, but might do exceptionally meaningful things in so many other ways. And yeah, that is an inspiration, and I wish that every community had that. But that's probably beyond the scope of your ability to put one in every community in the United
Oh,
States.
yeah, I get the offer. I've been getting offers for 4 years or so, and I've said to them, I can't duplicate the magic that we have at Don't Miss a Beat. There's a magic of impact and love that we give people that is so genuine. I mean, I can tell you each kid's name at Don't Miss a Beat, and I have 70 kids. I can tell you each of their story. I can tell you their family. You can't scale that. You know, yeah. I mean, I can license our program to other people, but you can't scale that commitment and that beauty. But I did want to give one piece of advice before I left. If any of you all want to work in this community space and you want to work in the nonprofit space, because it's becoming very popular to work and start a nonprofit. Everybody wants to work in a space of diversity and equity and inclusion and help. What I'm going to tell you all is this: be the real deal. If you want to do this work, whatever that is, like there's an agency here in town. The woman has an incredible mission. It is geared towards helping people who have been victims of sex trafficking, and she takes these amazing women, brings them in, teaches them a trade, and they actually make clothing and blankets and all that, and then they resell them to the community. It's a beautiful work, and she houses them, gets them off the street. But that woman is incredibly invested in what she does, and she breathes, eats, and sleeps it. Because, and I say that to say, you got to do that, because otherwise, if not, there's a lot of people that are entering this space that are just doing it because they're trying to use it as a write-off or as an entity to another larger entity. But you won't be able to succeed and make real difference if it's not what you're into. So if you really want to get into that community space, take time. All children I'm very passionate about, but particularly disadvantaged children, and utilizing the arts to help them is a passion, because I see myself in these children. So make sure whatever your mission is, you see yourself in that mission or in whoever you're serving, and you'll probably be able to have long-term success. And then the one advice that people gave to us, they said, if you can make it past five, I think it was, if you can make it past 5 years, then you'll be fine. So yeah, I just want to give that advice too.
I think that's important advice, and you're right that market. It's weird that is a market right now, but it's oversaturated, and like any oversaturated market, the real deal
Yeah.
kind of rises. I'm mixing metaphors here, but yes, yes, I really can't believe we're at time. I feel like we could talk forever, but we are, which means I'm getting it turns over to my little closing remarks, which will both start and end with a thank you. Thank you so much, Ulysses, for this incredible presentation, this great conversation, the incredible work that you're doing on the bandstand and off, and this book that I cannot wait to read when it comes out. Thank you to everyone who joined us today, whether it was here in our webinar call or on YouTube on the live stream. Thank you, of course, to the Jerome Mirza Foundation that fully funds this incredible project every year. Yes, Those folks are instrumental, no pun intended, to making the arts happen. And for Knox College for the support of this project. Lots of people to thank. Our Dean and Provost Mike Schneider, our President Teresa Mott, the Knox College Communications Office, particularly Bria Cunningham and Lisa Van Riper, who have helped us a ton. Our beautiful graphics work from iMagiqWorks. And of course, Andy Crawford, who once again is behind the scenes, but here he's hiding out in my guest room right now. He is a magician who apparently has extra hours in the day that none of us, the rest of us, have. And then just a couple of notes. Ulysses keynote presentation today and this Q&A will be available to view on the Knox College YouTube channel through the rest of the residency. So if you enjoyed today's event, you can definitely share that. Share it with students, friends, colleagues. This is not information we're trying to keep secret. Revisit it, and there's a lot here, right? You can't do it all in one day, as he said. We have one more keynote presentation and discussion coming up on Sunday, May 2nd, with drummer, bandleader, and composer Jeremy Cunningham. His talk delves into the topic of breaking down the so-called fourth wall that exists between performing artists and their audiences, and that will be followed 2 weeks later by a live performance by Jeremy's group on Sunday, May 16th, featuring his project, The Weather Up There, which is a stunning work written both in response to and as a way of processing the loss of his brother in a home invasion. The work is a powerful contemplation on love, loss, and the ripple effects of gun violence in our communities. We'll be releasing more details about that live performance closer to the event as we know exactly what space we can have it in based on health and safety regulations. And a huge reminder that this week brings us the return of the Rutabaga Jazz Festival. We are actually doing our jazz festival this year. It will be at the beautiful Orpheum Theater this Friday and Saturday. 2 sets on Friday with Soul Message, an incredible organ trio, and 2 sets on Saturday with Greg Ward's Rogue Parade. You had Greg's website, I think, up on your presentation. Great musician. We love Greg. He's from originally from Peoria, just down the road. We've known him for a long time. He's a great friend. And our Bega Kids event will be happening Saturday morning. All of this is at the Orpheum Theater. You'll need to reserve tickets in advance. So there's limited audiences, spacing, all those good things. So you'll have to call the Orpheum for tickets to make sure that we get all of that taken care of so everyone is safe. And I do just want to say once again, before I say good evening and happy Sunday night to everybody, thank you, Ulysses. It was such a pleasure to get to know you, and I hope that this is the first part of getting you here on campus at some point so we can work together and make music together. This was just a joy, and thank you for sharing your afternoon with us and all of your wisdom and talent. It was really, really our pleasure.
Thank you, Nikki and Andy. You all take care.
Thank you. Have a lovely evening, everyone, and hope to see you at Rutabaga.